Hi, welcome. I'm very amused by my background. Let's discuss this thing called the United States of America some more, shall we? I have my Wikipedia page all ready to go. But I guess here, maybe I'll just offer some opening reflections. So, why are we talking about America? One of the points that I recently made on the Twitters was that, anything can be the object of sustained attention. And in a way, everything can stand in for everything else. I think it's important to see that. I think also that for everyone who is invested in some idea of America in the sense that they like it or something, the idea is that it holds a space for them as part of a variety of people that exist. People might want a larger or smaller variety of people to be included in that. But regardless of how small it is, um, there's still a lot of heterogeneity. I think in these days, it's easy for us to look at things. You might say superficial, easier to understand differences. Skin color. Our the way our bodies are. What we call our genitalia or our chromosome, or our biological makeup or our ethnicity. Our family history. These sorts of things. Um, because it's a lot harder to connect on a deeper level. So basically, something that I think about a lot, I struggle with, is establishing, emotional and intellectual intimacy. I guess I should also say spiritual intimacy, but I already feel like I'm sort of presenting a tripartite, which is to say, a three-part, division of everything, which I don't know, I don't want to do. But anyway, you should take everything with a grain of salt. It's one of the I made up a sort of mutual agreements that people could use together that I would really like to do. And the first one is just that it's called figurative language. It basically means that language is always a little slippery, and like when we come to a place where we don't agree about a word, like we shouldn't be surprised, and we should really try and figure out how to work through that in a mutually agreeable way, as opposed to like coming down to this idea of like, oh, other people are using language wrong. um but I mean, there again is pluralism, right? Because I mean, there's language and language, right? When people say freedom fighter, like people might, in the name of something that they consider to be sacrosanct, harm other people, right? And at that point, um we definitively get into a gray area, put it that way. And I think for all of us to take responsibility for being in this world, I think one of the things that I've been reflecting on when it comes to America is, I guess, art which is produced. So anyway, I'm thinking about the No Country for Old Men in the very beginning, where the sheriff, is saying that you have to go up against something that you don't understand. You're putting your soul at hazard, and that you've got to say, okay, I'll be part of this world. And so I'm open to the idea that in some sense we have done this before we were born or something. But there's also something to be said for just embracing the circumstances that we're dealt and making the most of it. So I guess, yeah. Anyway, I'm just waxing poetic, but similar to like an entrepreneurial spirit. But again, like I'll go on one little more segue. I want to revisit the idea of the frontier. And I don't know if I said this or not, but for me personally, the idea of the frontier is more fundamental than the idea of America. And for me, the frontier, in its in one of its most important senses, refers to the time when our species or hominids or something had not spread out over all of the territory, so that when people would go out, they would see other wild animals and things like that, but they wouldn't see other people. So the idea of being able to get away from all other people by like continuing to explore the frontier, basically. But then everywhere along before that was also the frontier at one point. And in some sense, the idea of a frontier is very circumstantial to a person, because there's the inner frontier. It's a frontier for you, right? I think I'm thinking of Samwise in The Lord of the Rings, or Sam, I don't know, who says that I've never been this far from home before, or something. So in that sense, you're going into the frontier, right? And so it's very important to me, because the idea of it's actually very symptomatic of a core tension, right, with the whole idea of America, which is that many people would describe America as the core. That would be one of their main labels for like the system, or like a global empire, or like a military you know bully. I don't know, I'm trying to be diplomatic here, but like a lot of people have the opposite of good associations with the idea of America, basically. And then it's interesting because of course, America as a signifier or something can mean many different things. There should be, oh yeah. So now I'll jump over to uh, my other window here. Oh dear. Yeah, so I'm trying to show you. So America can mean the Americas. There's also a city. Okay, so there are some cities. Yeah, so I mean there's a lot, right? Albums and songs and everything. And people, that's pretty funny. Fictional characters, ships and boats, transportation. American, that's also interesting. We could look into the naming of the Americas. Yeah, American. Okay, international law. Anyway, so yeah, we're talking about United States, America. What was I just saying? Some people just don't truck with the idea of America. It's the opposite. But so the thing is, even if you don't like the United States of America, that's what I was getting at. Then the concept of America is broader than that. So like, when we're talking about America, we could just as easily be talking about the Americas, right? Um, and then like the New World. Like this is big stuff, because then you're pretty much immediately locked into world to come and kingdom of God. And it's like, for me, this is a very key reference. This is like tangential to America, but just in terms of spirituality in general, the idea of the world to come, as in there's going to be a new creation or something, that for me is an opening where the Judeo-Christian, Islamic, Baha'i, whatever you want to say, people of the book, in that sense, that is where that opens up onto not even just Eastern, whatever, ideas of cyclical time. There's also in the Western tradition, right? You have transmigration of the soul, right? Or yeah, but also the wheel of time. It should just be like a regular thing. I don't want a book series. Damn, it's not going to be like it. There should be like a wheel of time thing. Anyway. Okay, how about this, right? Bhavakara, the wheel of life and teaching aid, right? So it's a cyclic existence. And what else? Basically, this is a place where you can overlap, because this idea of a world to come, like, basically, like, I think you can be skeptical that it's like, well, how do you know that's going to be the last one? Right? Like, there could be another world after that one. And this is all obviously very metaphysical, just speculation on the lore of established world religions. But for me, what's interesting is that like they have to do with these summary pronouncements as to the purpose and what's going to happen to everything ever. And that's really, in a way, something you need to do. Like, in terms of taking narrative responsibility, if you're going to try and stand there and be like, I'm standing in for authority, right? And like, I have something to say that's worthwhile, right? It's one way to say it is, you have to be of the right logical order or something like that, logical type or logical order. Anyway, what Anthony Wilden says in System and Structure and Baudrillard quotes, right? Basically to say like, if you're going to stand there and act like, you have an answer to a problem, like you need to, be adequate to the problem. You need to face up to how big the problem is, right? And at that point, to say that you're going to solve the problem, that is to assume a massive responsibility, right? And so to, be able to acknowledge that, at least in some circumstances, act with the gravity that implies, anyway. But so the thing is, one of my ideas, which I think could be related to the United States, is that in order to achieve a goal, maybe I should just like go back out of this. Like, in order to achieve a goal, like you actually want to aim past that goal. So like you could sometimes fall into this, right? Like say you want to run a mile. So you try to start to run a mile. But then, like you feel sore or I don't know, something happens. You don't wind up running a mile. But the thing is, you like practice running half a mile. So like, or like even, aside from getting better at running, you got out of the house, right? You exercised, right? So it's like maybe you don't like running and you start swimming, right? But but that's not to say that it was a mistake, right, to run. You learned something about yourself, all these things. And so that is the mentality, right, that we should basically have toward everything, where like it's totally appropriate to have, like, in terms of the American spirit, right, it's totally appropriate to have like a can-do attitude, want to keep it to business, not get into anything like if you don't want to. But at the same time, like what am I trying to think of? For some reason, the term Southern hospitality is coming to mind for me. But it's basically like what it means to be a good citizen or something. Like at this point, what it means to like, what it means to be part of a worthwhile group of people. Like, I shouldn't necessarily say it's more demanding, but like it's very pressing in its demandingness because like shit's coming to a head, right? So for me, sitting here, again, I'm half German. My grandparents on my mother's side were raised in Nazi Germany, right? So for me, sitting here with Donald Trump, coming into office, 1933 is in my mind. Not because, to complicate matters, I'm just arguing with people on Reddit, like, it's just too simple to just say like, oh, this is fascist or like, oh, they're Nazis or something, because things are just complex, right? Like, I think that there's basically a simplicity of thought and you could just call it dogmatism. It doesn't really matter what you call it, right? Because you could be like on both sides. It's like, no, like I don't acknowledge, a left, right, something, anyway. And then people will put all the sorts of labels on you. But I mean, you got to just like confront that when it comes. Anyway, what was I trying to say here? Well, I was starting with this idea of like, you can totally have this can-do spirit, right? Like in terms of like America, it's like, oh, I don't want to hear about how America was like bad, right? Like that's a bummer, right? Like I don't know what to do about that, and like whatever. So in a way, there's a piece of where that's coming from that is like totally fine. That it's just like I want to just like be chipper, or like I'm trying to just like go through my business. Okay, that's fine. And but that goes along with a point that engaging with this sort of material, or engaging with what do I mean by that? Like tough things. And the thing is that there is stuff like that for everyone. It just could be different things. But so when it comes to, again, the United States of America, that's one of like the biggest things it's one of the most famous things in the world, right? I mean, the United States of America, right? And then it has done a lot of things, right? So in terms of like guilt or accomplishment or whatever, there's just like it's just at its highest scale, right, with the United States of America, because it is, by far anyway. But of course, that's already to assume that the United States of America is one thing, right? So actually, I think it's pretty interesting to consider again Mark Milley with the idea of America. Nice. Not fealty to one person or to a political party, but to the idea of America, an idea unlike any other in human history. That's what we swear an oath to. Oh, I'm not sharing the screen. Let me show you this. This is what I'm fucking talking about. Sorry for swearing, but it's like, this is what I mean. Like, this is highly mythical, right? Like, Mark Milley is like, in a way, doing grand style, right? Like, Mark Milley is making a very strong claim here, right? Also, fealty. We should look this up. Loyalty to a lord. Yeah, like fealty is kind of like an intense word to use, right? It should be like loyalty, right? Okay. The quality of being loyal. That really doesn't help. Okay. Oh god, now it's giving me hmm. Allegiance, right? Support or allegiance. And then, I mean, you see allegiance, you should already be thinking. We're going right back over here of the source of allegiance. Oh my goodness. Like, yeah, so we can go back to David Hume. I wanted to also introduce a few aspects of American lore that are important to me. I made a whole list, but I'll get to a lot of other things later. First of all, I should have actually just started here. So, like, there's the American School of Economics, but it was like hidden, right? Like, anyway, yeah, now I'm going to stop talking like an idiot. Anyway, so, there's the American School of Economics. So, like, we're going to update this. Like, we are working from this game plan. And so we can basically just like appropriate American school economics. So that's like step one. The core aspects here, right, are tariffs, infrastructure, and then national bank or currency. So we're going to update these for our time because these are like, we're talking about tariffs, like literal tariffs today, but or infrastructure, right? Obviously. And, in a sense, like those are relevant topics, right? But like I'm interested in rereading these things. So tariffs, like when I'm thinking about tariffs, I'm thinking about, the obsession with interpersonal boundaries, right? Which is going on. That is where I want to basically say that we can understand that I'm a government man. Like you're interfacing, you are a lawgiver, right? In the sense of like you teach people how to treat you, or you have to advocate for yourself. If you're alone with somebody and they start, doing whatever, it's like you can leave, you don't have to say anything. But it's like, you need to look out for yourself because like there's not somebody to walk around with you all the time. So that's where tariffs come in, where it's like, will you do this? Will you do that? That's sort of your boundaries, or it has to do with your decision making, basically. But so for me, again, this tariffs, it goes into cognitive affective protectionism. My essays do still come up, I believe. I never did put in citations. It's pretty great. But so yeah, metonymy economy. It's so funny. Cognitive protection and other cultivation forms of capital and nexuses of cognitive affective schemata. So like So like this is all just written in like hyperverbal like gobbledygook, but like it makes sense if you parse it, or like if I explain it to you, basically. So I'm not saying like this is a great paper. Anyway, this paper showcases cognitive affective protectionism as an example. Okay, so what's an example of? Look at this sentence. Wow. In one major contemporary example, the biosphere, long taken for granted within a myopic Western philosophy of science, which assumed cardinal importance in human life as the processes that we rely on begin to fail due to economic activities. We can parse the myriad subproblems which constitute the broad problematic of humanity's relationship with the natural social environment in the 21st century through cognitive affective science's ability to formalize the poetic, in other words, cognitive affective theories laid down by romantics like Shelley and Baudrillard, provide economics through transdisciplinary grounding with the ability to make endogenous, formerly exogenous variables, in so doing, allowing for the appreciation of deep homologies between social cognition and environmental economics, and facilitate the definition, categorization, operationalization, and refinement of economic social cognitive strategies which were previously ill defined. This paper showcases cognitive affective protectionism as an example. So, this is an example of an economic social cognitive strategy which is then what we're trying to do is facilitate its definition, categorization, operationalization, and refinement. Right. So you could also think of this as a concept of operations. I don't think I was turned on to this idea yet. But like, whatever our idea of America is, like it should be a concept of operations, right? Like it's something to do something with, right? But anyway, to describe this, so cognitive affective protectionism. So what do I mean by this? Protectionism is like it's a tariff, right? It's a barrier to inside outside. So like say you are in a loud place and you put in headphones and you listen to music. So maybe you don't have control over your listening, say you want to stay in this environment. You don't have control over your hearing in the sense of like you can't be in quiet, right? But you can subject yourself to a loud noise that you choose, right? And is more or less pleasant. I don't know, maybe even like you're happy to be listening to music or something. Anyway, the point is that in this sense, like you're insulating yourself from this noise, right, which is coming from outside. And everything is like that, right? It's like, oh, now you go from walking to being in your own car, right? But then you go from being in a car to being in a plane, right? Or like not just flying, but like having your private plane, like, and having a sensory deprivation chamber, right, and all sorts of things. But so key here, it's not just an inside outside thing, because it's basically to say that we think with our relationship to the outside world, but so like cognitive affective protectionism is different than to be say like, oh, this is mental. Because so for example, because putting the earbuds in your ears, for example, in order to give yourself a more pleasant background noise, like that's cognitive affective protectionism. Okay, so I need to explain this, right? Okay, so cognitive is coming from like cognitive science. So it has to do with like how we think, right? And then very interestingly, right, there's metacognition, right? So thinking about thinking. So in a sense, like that's all there is to do in terms of talking and writing. If you're once you get down to serious business, right? Like there's it's all as through this definition, this is all very cognitive behavior, right? Okay, so cognitive, like if you look at cognitive science, like it includes emotion, right? But when we talk about cognition, right, and thinking or whatever, like we neglect emotion. Basically, there's a big problem with emotion because emotion is hard to talk about. And so like there's a big focus on like things that are more easily standardized, right? And in a sense, going back to this is a Gettysburg Address reference, which I guess is relevant to the age. Abraham Lincoln all line, right? So it is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, is what I'm saying. Like it's all to the good. Like in general, like it's part of my dynamic that like I'm not here, this is very John 3:17 coded. which is like, okay, but like a Christianity, we're going to have to get to America Christianity. Anyway, John 3, no, 17. Not to condemn the world, but like through and be saved. Like, not trying to save anything, but the point is not to condemn, right? Not his son to condemn, right? The point is that it's like, this is the idea to have in a way toward everything. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, right? Because in a way, everything is, coming to consecrate a grave, right? We're always trying to do right by our ancestors and all this. And actually, all the things that we do, like our productive activities or whatever, like that's all the same, right? Everything that we're trying to achieve has to do with the idea of living up to something, right? Getting to where we were supposed to go. And so, like, when I think of America, we took the, we, right? The United States of America, right? If it was, what is it? Like the goal marker or something. It's sort of like Babe Ruth. Like, think about Babe Ruth. This is entirely contained, to, progression of home run champion baseball. It's something like this. Right? So it's like, what am I trying to say here? Freaking, like in terms of like where the goalpost is, like this is a very simplistic way of thinking about it. But it's like obviously for better or for worse. Like this is bad, because in a way, right, Napoleon, right, basically moved the ball forward, right? Not in the sense of like made anything better, not necessarily to say that there's progress. But in terms of like being dynamic, like mixing things up, and you don't have to necessarily be a revolutionary or something. Like, think of Bismarck also went to war. But even if you just do internal development, right? Like there's conflict, right? That's dynamism. You're mixing things up, right? It's very important that we're not talking about something that has to be military, right? It doesn't have to, like, basically what I'm trying to say is that like in conquest, in all of this, like something is happening that needs to be appreciated, but it's not essentially military. So for example, like Alexander went to India and there was a lot of conquests along the way, but he also brought along like philosophers and like Pyrrho. And so like there's things that happen as a result of these conflicts. And so like it's possible, again, another one of my key references within America is Lincoln's second inaugural. Oh, I realize I need to explain more about the American School of Economics. But, like justing lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations, right? Like we've been to war with people before, right? So it's like, we want to have a lasting peace with everybody. Anyway, of course, it's not that simple or anything. All I'm trying to get across is that I'm trying to refer to like what America did, because I'm trying to compare it to like Babe Ruth. Because if you look at all these people, like if you look at, this is the home run records, right? So before Babe Ruth was there, like somebody had 138, right? And Babe Ruth just like, how many years later? 17 years later, I guess, or no, 15, right? It's at 714, right? So it's just sort of like, so basically, America eclipsed the UK, sometime between World War I and World War II or something, like, or maybe way before that. I'm not sure. But the point is, like, where it had been at that point, it's in a way, it's not just to say, America special. It's really that America was the one to be there at that time, right? To do the thing. But at the same time, it's just a thing about history, right? It's a thing about our lives. That it's like, oh, that was happenstance. That could have been different. And it's like, yeah, but it wasn't, right? And so, like, yeah, we're in the positions that we're in, right? And that, like, that has to be accepted, right? That doesn't mean that we have to accept the way other people frame what's going on. And so, that obviously gets political because everything has to be framed in a certain way in order to be intelligible. But like, just because, so for example, there's rich people and poor people right now or something, that doesn't mean that's always going to be that way. And that doesn't mean that, anybody who says like, oh, look, I'm successful and like I have virtue or something, doesn't mean they're actually like good people or something. Oh, I realize I'm not showing you the screen anymore. That's a bit rough. I will go back and share it with you. Oh no, I can't. Oh, here we go. Yeah, so I was trying to show you Lincoln's inaugural address, and then these are the baseball stats, right? So Babe Ruth just running away with it, right? So it's like, oh, you had like ships. It's like you didn't even really do that much with oil. Like now we're gonna do oil. Like now we're gonna do space. We're gonna do all these technologies. Like we're gonna be all over the world, right? Like America, the United States of America, right? Where are the like global military bases? Oh, okay. This is a good one. Yeah. Oh, what? Why is it like that? That's not what we wanted. Boom, 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 boom. Right. So, yeah, this is a lot, right? I mean, nobody else has ever really done anything like this before, right? But then the question is like, what is going on? Like, what does this map mean, right? And that's basically the question of what is America. That's where you immediately have to go upstairs. You have to question like, well, what is America? Is a type of what? That even in itself is like its own question. But say you want to say, America is a nation, right? Like, what is a nation, right? So we have this idea of the imagined community. Depicts a nation as a socially constructed community imagined by the people who perceive themselves as part of a group, right? So who perceives themselves as part of it? Like, what's interesting with American is like there's a lot of people who perceive themselves as American who aren't considered American by other people, right? So that's basically a big thing, like with Donald Trump and people who support him or something. And like I was saying before, like the 1933 vibes. Basically, the thing is like if it just comes out that like on January 20th, it's like, yeah, like there's going to be the deportation of 10 million people or whatever. Like that's going to be a fucking shit show. That's going to be awful. That's an atrocity. Like, that's going to be a lot, right? And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of uproar around that. And it's going to, force us to reckon with this, right? But basically, the underlying dynamic is, there are people, they don't necessarily even think of themselves as American, but some of them probably do, right? There's people who are like here, right? They're American, like they're here. I don't know, like they're living in America. They're living their lives here. And anyway, but some people are like, no, you're not an American. You're not a real American, right? So in terms of what that is supposed to mean, like, this doesn't really work. Oh, this is it. I did it. I'm so good. This is basically what I wanted to say. Like, people just call themselves American, right? Very predominant, like, around here. And it's also, that's like definitely where like my dad's side of like this family is. Like, I think my dad's dad was from like, my dad was born in Arkansas, and his dad maybe too, but then like there's some ones in Texas and stuff. And then my dad's mom was from Rome, Georgia, which is up here. So like this is what I was basically trying to say. Like this is like the hotbed of nativism. Like it's certainly spread out, and now people just like have this idea that white Americans or something are the real Americans. But see, like the thing is, anything like that, I've said, you're like, oh, we want homogeneity, right? So we're going to exclude a lot of people. We're going to kick them out, whatever. basically the issue with that is that there's always going to be heterogeneity. And in a way, like, you want there to be, right? You don't want everybody to be the same. The whole point of having a good government or something is to let people be themselves to the greatest degree possible. The problem is, like, there's also certain standards, right, that are supposed to be enforced, right, according to everybody. And so the question is, how's that going to work? Right? That's really the big issue. And what are the standards, right? And people have mutually exclusive sets of standards. But that's true, again, within any subpopulation. Like, it's not just a problem of like political Islam versus American constitutionalism or something, where it's like, we believe in the rule of law, whatever that is. And it's like, oh no, we believe in the like will of God, right? And it's like, oh no, well, we're not going to let your will of God idea about the will of God supersede like our historical documents or whatever. Then it's like, again, all well and good that we should do this, right? It's all well and good. It's altogether fitting and proper that we should do this, right? Obviously, because like, before you change your idea, like, you should be thoroughly convinced that, there's a better idea. And so like, anyway, in a way, like, I think we're all, it's like an entrepreneurial situation. Like, we're all racing for, this, the idea of, something that can square the circle in terms of social morale, in terms of like letting people get along. Because again, like, we face the problem of distrust, dissension, conflict at all scales. And so this is, it's very important to understand that it's like, conflict is not going away. And again, it is necessary because you want there to be variety. Because if there's no conflict, basically there's no movement. And you want to be moving, right? And then what? But at the same time, like, it needs to not necessarily be managed, but like, what we understand in our day and age is that with the level of technology, the core issue that we face as Americans or whoever we are, right, is that the kind of technology that we're developing is very destructive. And if basically it's not enough to, have nothing against somebody, it's not enough to, have no reason to hurt somebody. It gets to a point where there has to be an active reason why you want somebody around in order for you to be able to coexist with them. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a whole big story or something, but like, if you see somebody doing a job, like somebody is a firefighter or something, it's like, oh, okay, well, definitely happy, whatever. Obviously, you don't know if that person might be a killer, right? You don't know, right? But like, going off the superficial thing, it's like, oh yeah, that person is serving a role that like I'm happy is being served. So it's very like talking World War III blues by Bob Dylan. Again, another thing about Æmerica is, again, our artists. For me, Bob Dylan, big example. But anyway, I'll let you be in my dream if I can be in yours. That's the point. So that's what it basically takes to be able to get along. And so the idea of Æmerica, right, is that, it's allowing different people to get along. In the original format, right, it was the people who were most important to be able to get along were like the very richest people left in like what was formerly colonies. I also think it's really weird, like, why are they called states? Like, I guess it's because after they were colonies, each one of these territories then individually became a state. But so that's another thing about Æmerica, which is that like the name for Æmerica references the concept of a state inside of itself. So it's a meta state, right? It is a state which is a agglomeration of other states. So where you could imagine, right, a United States of Earth, right? I mean, because there's the idea of military conquest. I think that's what more people are afraid of, that America is going to, deploy drones or whatever, it's going to like kill everybody and, conquer the world, do a world domination. Like, the thing is, like, yes, we've actually been in the sphere where we're struggling for world domination since like the 1940s or something, right? Or even before, right? Like, it's been seen that like, oh, this technology thing is coming to a head, right? And so, especially with, the nuclear weapons and so forth, the stakes, right, of the conflict are immense. And so in the 20th century, right, things seemed so stable, right? It was unimaginable that something would happen. But again, you need to think about things not just in the course of a human lifetime, right? Which is really not to say that things take a long time to change. It's just that everything changes given long enough time. And like the next thing that you need to reconcile yourself toward, right, is that things take less time to change than you think. And the other thing, just having to do with cosmology, is that like, yeah, time telescopes at certain points, put it that way, right? And so a lot, and especially if you just think about the practical material, whatever, like situation, like the level of technological development means that more work is being done, like in terms of physics. Like work is force times distance, right? What is S? Displacement, right? Force times displacement. So it just means like stuff is getting done, right? And so again, like power in physics is another one of my favorite references. I can't type, but that's fine. But it's like energy per unit time. But I think these are like somehow related. You can somehow, yeah, okay. Power is work over time, right? So force times distance over time, right? So work is power, right? Anyway, like as applied to time. Anyway, like this is obviously like working a metaphor, but literally work is just like change that's being done in the world. And so like the more like technology develops, the more, not just the more change, but it's also more subtle, it's more intentional. Like if you think about what's going on with LLMs, like this is basically getting to a place where, you know, a very high degree of specific intention can be deployed like to everywhere, right? So like everybody could be infiltrated with, you know, somebody who they know online who's secretly a bot, right? Who is influencing them in some way, right? And like that happens all the time in terms of things that are curated that we don't understand are curated, right? And so maybe we like are susceptible to forms of influence that like we wouldn't even be aware of. Anyway, it's not to be paranoid about things, right? Because again, like in my overall cosmology, right? Like everything's meant to happen, right? Which again, maybe it's something to talk about. Apparently, George Washington talked about providence. And I'm going to end it here because I'm tired. But like looking at Washington's theological beliefs, it's clear he believed in a creator God of some manner and seemingly one that was also active in the universe. This God had three main traits. He was wise, inscrutable, and irresistible. Not bad. Washington referred to this God by many names, but most often by the name of Providence. Washington also referred to this being by other titles to infer that this God was the creator God. This aspect of his belief system is central to the argument of whether or not he's a deist. Okay, we don't care. However, for Washington, it was also improper to question providence. This caused Washington to accept whatever happened as being the will of providence. Like, okay, yes, right? Like, we're again going back to Epictetus, the Enchiridion. It's like saved, right? I even know where we're going, right? We want what happens. Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish that they happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. Right? So again, we're back to the American plucky attitude of like you roll with the punches, right? Almost like a cartoon character. Like, which is also to say, like, all this wisdom stuff, like you don't have to operationalize it in any certain way. It's not like, oh, it's very serious and like you need to like sit down and really listen to what I'm saying. You know, it's like, no, like you can bounce off the wall. You can have big DD energy. You can like do whatever you want. Like you can be moody. Like you can be like unimpressed, right? Go for it. Right. But it's like, anyway, like you can still just like have a certain level of like, yeah, it is what it is. Right. But again, that's not to say like we sit around and we like resign ourselves and we don't do anything. Like, no, like we do everything that we can think of, right? But a big part of that is like stewing. It's like it's internal, like it's conceptual, like, but you can do it with other people. But like you really need to be aware of the fact that like you're at the frontier of yourself. So like other people can be a hindrance, you know, not to be antisocial, but like, you know, other people can be a hindrance if they understand you in a certain way to where it's basically like they're misgendering you. Like this is what misgendering is, but it's like people wouldn't normally think about it think about it this way. And so maybe I'm going to lose some people. But like this is the type of psychedelic or even that is a transmigration. It's like this is the type of bleeding together of discourse that I think is appropriate. But now I already forgot what I was just talking about. But anyway, things happen as you wish. Like you have your you go along, but that doesn't mean you resign yourself. Because again, like the desires that we have, again, like as Americans, what we want, right? Like, and this is like the thing about individualism and collectivism, like they're related, right? It's very important that like you can't just do whatever you want and then like expect not to be killed, right? Like, but at the same time, like it can happen that the world is not good enough. And so you like somebody takes a stand. I'm thinking of Sedna, actually, who's from America, right? The Inuit are from America, but Sedna, right, rejected her suitors. And in a way, absolutely, right? And that's where you see like a strong, a nice strong-headed American woman or something. Like some people wouldn't think that way, right? Like they would, woman knows her place or something. I don't know. But even within that, there's variations. Anyway. But it's all to the good because it has to do with what you want, right? And like if somebody else is going to tell you that like you can't have what you want and like you feel like you should be able to, then you do you, right? Like this is a very important thing because it signals ways in which all forms of tradition or dogma, right, can become limited and not good enough, right? That's where you basically pull a Declaration of Independence. Because I love this. When in the course of human events, okay, we overlook human, right? We don't like human. But like when in the course of events, right? It's just like from time to time it happens, right? You have to draw a line in the sand, right? And so basically what I'm trying to say is like, we don't want to be military. We don't want to like conquer other people, right? Like if you think about what America would do, like again, conquering the world and then like the idea of, inaugurating people as states, right? Like, I mean, even that, like Hawaii, it's not to say that was, people still regard that as colonial, right? Or the Mexican-American War, in my opinion, was a war of aggression, right? And so like constitutes like an enormous atrocity. For example, but like that's again all to the good, right? Because I mean there was all something that people point out who are apologists, right? Or people who don't want to think, right? People who don't want to take responsibility and don't want to make things into their business that actually are their business, right? When people say things like, oh, well, that happened a long time ago, or like a lot of other people did that too. And so basically we don't need to do anything special because we're just like everybody else. And it's like, that's not true, right? Like if you're going to be exceptional, then you're going to be exceptional, right? And it actually reminds me of the state of Israel, like not to be too intense about it. But, people will often say, well, it seems like Israel's being held to a higher standard than other countries. And I'm just like, isn't the whole point of Israel that, God decreed that the land should go to people, but that they should also follow rules so that like they are held to a different standard than other people? Because like in their cosmology, they are like the core meaning of existence and they need to do it right. Anyway, that's neither here nor there, but like obviously the United States of America and Israel tried together. So like when we talk about the US, especially now in practical affairs, like of course we're going to have to talk about Israel. Of course we're going to have to talk about Israel. I'm trying to enunciate more. I think I normally talk so fast and I mumble, probably also coming from a self-esteem issue where I am not just talking well enough. But anyway, not to be too unhinged. United States of America, Israel, promised land, held to a higher standard. Like, exactly. So when it comes to like our history, like the Mexican-American War or slavery or something, like the way that we need to approach that as Americans or something, it's like you can have that plucky can-do spirit, but it's like you do have some responsibility, right? Like in multiple senses. Like you could make it out to be like, if you're gonna like hurt a lot of other people in order to like build up wealth, like you should at least make it worth it. Like you should live well and you should like be worthy of it. Like you could even have that mentality, even if you have no intention of helping anybody else, right? But you should at least live up to, what was done, right? But I think a lot of people would also just like not care about that. They're like, oh, well, I'm sorry. They had some expectations. Like, I don't care. I think that's also very American in a way. But at the same time, again, like our lives are being threatened, right? Because we're also sort of the Titanic. The Titanic, I guess, came from England, but it was on its way to America. Never got here, right? And so, that's something to keep in mind. America is like something which hasn't fully arrived yet. And like it could always fail, right? And so, like, that's something to keep in mind. Like, it's an unfinished revolution or something, or it's now an ongoing. Anyway. So, it's in that respect, again, that I think it's important for us all to take responsibility. Oh, now I'm going back to the protectionism, I believe, because I needed to flesh that out. Weird concept of operations. I think it was just protectionism. That's pretty funny. I so can't type right now. So I think it was here. Well, it was a different one, but you have tariffs. So again, tariffs are like boundaries. So it's like we're always doing exchange. You're going to be thinking of symbolic exchange, like with Jean Baudrillard. So again, it's not necessarily a question of like being able to stop exchange, because even if it's sort of like ignoring something or putting something in a box and never looking at it, it's like you still are in a relationship to that. But still, like, we can modulate. So the idea of setting boundaries, going no contact, blocking somebody, realizing that like you don't need to take on like these feelings just because people have them, type of thing, and trying to like teach yourself to do that. Anyway, this is all related. So then protection of technologies, like that's where it's like we're all human capital. Like, but you can think about it like we're developing for ourselves. But you also need to think beyond the idea that we possess ourselves. But it's like we are all basically infant industries unto ourselves, and then there's other groups. So like the idea of a safe space, like people like poo-poo this idea, but it's like everybody wants one, right? Like you want a place where you're not going to be challenged on every little fucking thing, right? And you can speak with people like in a way that you're comfortable enough and start building, right? And like compare notes and stuff like that, as opposed to constantly having to be challenged at all times. Of course, even inside a protective racket, like you should be interrogating yourself. People don't, but they could, right? Like that's Edward Norton in the roast of Bruce Willis. Anyway, foreign direct investment. Anyway, it's basically like this. So cognitive active protectionism is a type of that other thing that I was talking about. I forget. But so this has basically been a bit more of my... Oh, it must have been when I was looking at the American school. Yeah, industry. Okay, infrastructure. So again, infrastructure, like we're the infrastructure, right? So in terms of like being emotional intelligence, for example, again, cognitive affective, right? So affective means like emotion, right? And then importantly, there's meta affect. Like we have feelings about our feelings. And so like this is important for me in terms of talking about greater jihad, which is pretty interesting. But I mean, reconciling Islam with America is a fine endeavor, right? And so, like, in terms of greater jihad, Muhammad might express it as like we are struggling with our emotions. But I think this is a very harmful way to look at it, right? Because we get this all or nothing idea about emotion, and it easily leads to self-deception. Of course, everything is self-deception, but unpleasant forms of self-deception. So instead of saying, that we're fighting our emotions or we're trying to, whatever, we have meta emotions in the same way that we think about our thinking, we feel about our feelings. And like there are meta emotions. So things like wanting to get better, right? Wanting to hold yourself to a higher standard, or repentance, right? Where you reflect on something that you did and you're like, well, I don't want to do that again. Right. And it doesn't even have to be like that intense. People can do it in their own way, right? You don't have to look bad. It's not for other people, right? It's sort of like you don't have to be humiliated, right? Ever, right? You never have to like let anybody look at you like they're better than you, because everyone, has, it's hard to even know what to say, right? But basically things that we feel bad about or that other people would judge us for, right? Everybody has that, right? And so anybody who would be looking at you and judging you, like they're not telling you all the things that you could judge them for, right? So like you don't need to take it that seriously. Anyway, point is like our emotional infrastructure, like right now our social fabric is in disarray, but in a way that's perfect, right? It's all fitting and proper. We've been tearing down, and you can see all around us new things rising up. You can see like people trying to nudge people into like being more mindful and stuff everywhere. Like this whole thing is like it's already happening. Like the good part is already happening or something. But like it does need to be continue to be pushed because people are dying, right? People are dying right now. And again, that's our infrastructure. Right? Again, not to just instrumentalize and like objectify people like, or whatever, but like that's at least better than, being complacent about people dying, right? And of course, those people they're Americans unto themselves, right? If you sit here and think about the fact that there are people who went into combat for the idea of America and wind up in a position where they are killing themselves, that shows you the direness of the situation, right? Because again, it's also not just, like people are being failed. The thing is that there is not the capacity. We do not have the capacity as a group of people to administer care, even when, right, obviously our honor is on the line, right? The right thing to do is on the line. And it's not just that like we're bad or we're selfish. It's more like we're scared. We're not sure that we're going to make it, right? And so it's sort of like, people see themselves, it's, you're in a foot race and like you're not sure, you're already not sure you're going to be able to outpace whatever threat, it is. And then like somebody needs help, right? Somebody wants help along. I mean, this is just to frame it in a way where you can see, because obviously all sorts of, psychopathic or whatever, very harmful, right? Because once you start to open up to this, right? Once you start to face the music, right? Which is again, what I think American exceptionalism should mean, where it's like, yeah, we can take, like, it's not even like, oh, we are doing this great burden. It's like, it's not even hard. Like, I'm sorry, you want me to grapple with all of world history and what it means and what my responsibility is to all sentient beings? Like, no problem, right? Like, I do that for breakfast, right? Like, no problem. Like, which is also to say, like, for anybody, like, it's not a big deal. Like, in my opinion, obviously you can reconsider how wise you think I am, but like, I don't think that like whatever change we need to go through or whatever, like, which is again something that you need to figure out for yourself. But like, I don't think it has to be any more unpleasant than it needs to be. Like, it might need to be somewhat unpleasant. And in a way, it's the kind of thing where you're like, oh God, it's the kind of thing you always knew was going to come, because like the way you live doesn't make any sense, because it's like you're living in a dream world, Neo. Like, if it's just like, oh yeah, there's like currencies and floating exchange rate, like there's a lot of mumbo jumbo where it's like, and who's in control of it? Oh yeah, the government and military and the finance people. It's like, yeah, it's a bunch of stuff you don't even know what's happening, right? It's all a secret, like it's all shell corporations, like whatever. Like, I'm over it, right? I'm not here to be like paranoid and everything. It's just like what's happening is a mystery, right? And fundamentally, America is a mystery, because it's like, what is happening, right? Like, there's another continent, and like what we call the United States of America is basically on the bolt. Like, North America is more temperate. Like, a temperate climate is more conducive at that time, or whatever. It's like more conducive to empire building. And so America like basically built an empire of like the entire temperate zone, or like a lot of it, of like what is called North America. Like the big, like there's like one landmass, but it like gets really small, and there's like big things, and like there's one anyway. And so it's just like, yeah, America's an emergency, because from the standpoint, right, of the people who were in the Americas, right, the arrival of the people from the old world, right, the people like just like you have to look at it from their perspective too, right? It's like you're just fucking chilling, right? And then some people just come out of nowhere, and then they just keep coming, and they keep coming, and they keep coming, and soon enough, like you don't have your land anymore. Like this is a funny thing because I actually don't think land belongs to anybody. That's actually very important to me. So like I don't think you can steal land. That might be a way to put it. Like, but you can kick people off land, right? Anyway, steal just implies that you're like transferring ownership, and I don't think. Yeah, I would basically like to be able to speak as though I don't recognize ownership. Like, of course, that's also very important to America, right? Is this idea of property and like protecting property, but like in its most righteous sense, like what property means is like the proceeds, the goods of your work, right? And so we've always had sort of specialized jobs that you use to like access everything else. And so for that reason, like there's some mediation between like what you do immediately and what you like, you don't just make everything you have. And then like the people who are the wealthiest are the people who made the most things for themselves, right? The people who are the wealthiest are the people who have some sort of high leverage thing that they do, which they can then use to like get a lot of things from other people in a lot of other different ways. Anyway, forget where I was going with that. But like in that sense of like the proceeds, the fruits of your labor, it's like, yes, everyone should like be able to enjoy, you know, like their own activity. Like we should all do things, right? Like hear me out on this. But like we should do things, and the things that we should do should benefit us. Like we should feel pleasure, right? And the things that we should do should also help other people, right? And also other people should do things that help us, right? That's basically what we want to happen. And again, it comes back to this idea of infrastructure. Like we need to be tended to. It's the kind of thing where like people in the movie tell the hero like you need to go home and like get some rest. Right? It's like yes, sometimes you have to sleep. Like you're not just an object or a tool. Like even so, yeah. And so this is becoming mission critical. So in terms of reinterpreting the American School of Economics, tariffs is again us on the individual level doing our boundaries, reconsidering social norms and everything. Norms are also forms of tariffs, right? And so really we're going to transnormal. Like we can get past norms basically, and norms never really obtain. And the whole idea of inside outside, it gets touchy. But just thinking about it, like we're reconceptualizing how we interact with the world and our forms of symbolic exchange with ourselves, with each other, and with everything. Subsidies is also like, you know, you pick something you invest in, right? Something like music, you know, you pick something that you want to especially put effort into, like an infant industry, which is a sub concern of yours, like a skill or a practice or whatever, you know, like, and then infrastructure, again, all related. You're the infrastructure, right? And Americans, right, are the infrastructure. And basically, really, the whole world is the infrastructure because, like, for America to exist, it has to be in a world. And if the world is not going to be killing itself, then you know we need to be helpful, right? And to be helpful, right, we need to we need to clean our room, right? And cleaning our room means like is said here in the second inaugural, right? I'm not going to pull it up, but it's like Mafrican, we need peace with ourselves and then with all nations, right? It's all well and good to want to help everybody else be peaceful, but in order to do that, like you would have to be peaceful. And again, you can get into the philosophy of peace. It's tricky again because conflict is endemic and you want it to be because you want there to be difference. And so like, yeah, peace is complicated anyway. And then national bank. So that again is money. It has everything to do with this because if we're pooling our resources, we're getting the fruits of our labor. Like we're putting something in and then we're getting something out. I'm not here to say, I don't know exactly how it's going to work in the future with currency. Like I would like to see us move past currency as quickly as possible. But you know, like people could still like it, like gambling or something. I could see. As it says, rather than speculation. It's funny. I like the opposite. But basically, you need to figure out how to distribute resources. Like, what are we investing in right now? And so this is again like all of this. So this would mean for on the individual level, you know, taking inventory of everything that you have and then deploying it with intention. Right. And again, infrastructure is also your cognitive infrastructure and your emotional infrastructure. So it means that you're doing your metacognition, right? You're thinking about how you're thinking. You are feeling about how you're feeling. You're reflecting on like like your baseline, like who you are, like in a more like general sense, and then what's your reaction to today, right? What is your reaction to today, or just your state of mind telling you about, how it would be appropriate, how you would do well to refine the quality of your intention and change your behavior moving forward. And again, I'm going to reflect here in closing. United States, the United States of America has an occult definition, okay? The occult definition of the United States of America is that a state is like a state of matter, right? It's a state of affairs, most fundamentally. So, state of affairs. Wow. Okay. So, the way the world actually must be, and we're making some proposition. Okay, whatever. But so, like, the United States is the United States of affairs, right? It's the United emotional states. It's the United affective states. It's the United altered states of consciousness, right? Like, the state is not about, like some institution or the state of Georgia or whatever, right? Like, that's all well and good, but what is the state of your soul, sir, right? Like, what's the state of your conscience? As in, you must do what you think is right. And so when in the course, right, of events, in the course of cognitive, affective events, dude, right, it becomes necessary to secede. My mind secedes, right? Check out the Pixies. I bleed, I believe. When it becomes necessary to withdraw from what is customary and forge a new path, right? And to seek companions in doing so, with, of course, an eye to the good of all, right? Not to run away from any trouble, but instead to set up a laboratory, right? Set up a laboratory of democracy, right? To gather together fellows with whom one is able to deliberate and come to a sense of common purpose. That is what is most important. So again, my advice to anybody, think of the people that are you're closest to, that are most important in your life, that you could actually talk to about things. And then think about refining your relationship with them, in particular with respect to, the larger situation. It's all well and good to sit there and be like, talk to each other about, capitalism and this, but where's the conversation going, right? Where is it going? Like, what is your course of action? And in particular, how are you directly interfacing with the core of technology? Like, what are you directly doing? Don't tell me that you're supporting a candidate, right? Don't tell me that you are I don't know, writing a letter campaign. At least tell me you're posting, right? You have your own rhetoric, but where are you getting your ideas, right? Don't just tell me you're watching some TV show or some YouTube channel and getting into some echo chamber, which is it could be correct, or something. It's all well and good to oppose wars or whatever, but what's your cognitive schema, right? What is your social ontology? What are the basic terms in which you contemplate what's going on? And how could there be too much uniformity among the people that you normally listen to in that regard? So that in actuality, y'all are all missing something, right? Which isn't to say that you're wrong and the other people are right in all of this, which is again to say the process of getting right with the Lord or whatever, the process of actually being ready to be part of beloved community or whatever, that process does not have to be unpleasant. It's not the point of the process is not to be unpleasant. This is just, again, my theory posting here, but again, it's not to be unpleasant and that you need to feel bad and you're going to be humiliated and you did a bad job. It's the exact opposite. You're doing great. You are a bad, whatever, the movie is about you. You are America, right? You're a movie star, right? You did it, right? We should all have a piece of that in us, right? We're the main character and we're doing a great job, right? But at the same time, there's another meta feeling, which is that, there's a lot of responsibility that goes into that, or not even responsibility, but part of what makes us so great, right, is that we enjoy, right? We eat this for breakfast, right? We enjoy taking on, these, by doing what it did, right? America, it's we're gonna become the strongest country in the world. It's okay, you just became Atlas, right? Right? You just volunteered, right, to whatever, like bottom line, like see to it that like things don't go super sideways, right? So if you're going to take that responsibility seriously, like it's an involved process. And again, American exceptionalism should go into the internal frontier. So like if we're going to unify with other ourselves, right? If we're going to have a more perfect union, we need to have that with ourselves. So like think about all your states of consciousness. Think about like the states you present to other people, and then think about your secret states, if you're looking at porn or whatever, some shameful thing that you do, which is also a part of you but other people don't know, right? Maybe the security, maybe some people do know, right? But anyway, like you are a totality, right? Like you are not just the parts of yourself that you present to other people, right? And that's okay, right? Like that's a big part of it, is that like it's okay. It doesn't have to be this big deal where it's like yeah, you're a freak. We're all a freak, right? Like it's part of that. But then once you get to it, it allows for an intimacy, and yeah, you're gonna cry about it or whatever, but like that's fine. Like there might not be crying in baseball, but we do allow it in other parts of America. Anyway, with that being said, I hope you have enjoyed the second foray into the discussion of Æmerica, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.